Thanks for tuning into A Better World, where we illustrate all the progress we're making as a civilization and providing examples as to why today is the greatest time to be alive. And in today's episode, we will be covering an article that I read from Scientific America. Now, the title of the article is Scientists Are Starting to Test Claims About Microdosing. Now, if you're like me, I have no clue what microdosing is. So, microdosing, after I read the article, is when people use about 1/10 of the average dose of a psychedelic drug. And the psychedelic drug in particular that they're talking about is magic mushrooms. And in magic mushrooms, there's something called psilocybin. And psilocybin is the exact thing in which this article is covering. And the reason it's covering is because there's a lot of anecdotal reports on Reddit in specific and of other people who are musicians, producers, designers, and even college students and people in Silicon Valley even who are using this, because there's claims that it increases focus, it increases creativity, it reduces anxiety, and it reduces depression. Now, not only that, but the most stunning thing that we've seen from these anecdotal reports is that this drug, psilocybin, is actually been reported to quiet, as the Buddhists or the monks would say, the monkey mind. So basically, the things that would keep you aware of what you're doing and more cautious of your actions and all in all just more self-conscious of yourself, all the negative things that you can think of. So like, I shouldn't do this, maybe I should do this, all the thoughts that you have popping in your head, apparently, per these anecdotal reports on Reddit and other people who are using it, it quiets that down, which allows them to think more freely. And what they have called this is the unconstrained consciousness. So, now, there are some countries who are actually decriminalizing it and giving permission to scientists to further test this. So in London, for example, the FDA has been approved to start clinical trials for this drug in particular to see how it affects depression. Now, the main goal with this is, since it has reports of reducing depression and anxiety, is to see if we can make a better antidepressant or an anti-anxiety drug from the compounds within the psilocybin. So there's potential that this could lead to something really great in the future for people who suffer with PTSD, depression in general and anxiety in general. So there's a lot of upsides to it. Now, diving into it a little bit more, there has been a psychologist and a psychedelics research, James Fadman, I believe is his name. Sorry if I'm butchering it. He has been talking about microdosing in particular for about 10 years, and he has a book out on it called The Psychedelic Explorer's Guide. And apparently in this guide, it is almost a step-by-step manual as to how to microdose and the effects that it will have. And so a lot of people have been taking his word and doing this and have been showing pretty good results. Now, once again, these are anecdotal reports, but there are signs that microdosing is also better, healthier than Adderall, which is great because Adderall, as I'm sure many of you know, is essentially methamphetamine. So people who are taking Adderall are taking meth in a way. So this will eliminate that, hopefully, if the results are promising from actual studies. Now, because psilocybin is illegal in most places, we don't have much to go on. However, recently, Netherlands has just decriminalized it and gave their scientists permission to begin conducting studies on this. Now, I do want to know, although they have conducted studies on these, they haven't seen anything that states or shows any improvement for logical thinking. However, they have shown that it does improve creativity. So what we're going to go through next is the test that they have done already. So basically, what they did was started out with a standard psychological testing for three in particular. And so they did this before they microdosed. And 2 of them were for problem solving, and 1 of them was to assess fluid intelligence. So the fluid intelligence would be the logical thinking, rational thinking, so on and so forth. And so basically the way they did it is microdosing is about 0.33 grams, and so the average participant here took about 0.37 grams. And 90 minutes after microdosing and taking their first test sober, they went back and took the test again. Now the first test they took was a picture concept task. So basically what that was is that there was 3 rows, and in those 3 rows were pictures. Now what they had to do was pick 3 pictures from each of the rows that basically made sense to go together. So for example, like a bath, a sink, and a hose all contain water and all kind of do the same thing in a way. So they would have to match things like that together. And so basically what that's shown is convergent thinking. And so the brain in this particular test had to do 3 things. The 3 things they was to weigh the alternatives, focus, and reject the wrong ones. So be able to tell which ones are wrong, which ones are right. And the second test that was done was an alternative use task. So basically this one, I'm sure some of you have done it, I know I've done this one in school, is where they were given 5 minutes to come up with as many ways to use a pen or a towel as possible. Now this is an example of divergent thinking. And the last test they did was a progressive metris test. And this was the fluid intelligence test. So basically what they did here is there was blocks either in a 2x2 or a 3x3. And the bottom right hand corner one was missing. And so what they had to do is pick the one that would best fit that pattern. So essentially pattern recognition, the logical thinking, and they had to do that sober and after microdosing. And what they found after these tests was that there was no change in fluid intelligence. So when we go to the block test, the missing block, there was no change from when they were sober to after they microdosed. However, there was significant improvement when it comes to the creative parts of the test. So for example, the picture concept test, beforehand, the average score before microdosing was 6.6. After they microdosed, it went up a whole % on average across the board for all the participants. So that's 7.6 after microdosing. So we see a huge increase right there. And then we see an even bigger increase when it comes to finding uses for pens or towels. So before, we see it at 14.7. Afterwards, though, we see it at 16.7. 2 whole points it went up after microdosing on average for these individuals. So that right there is a wonderful sign. Now mind you, these are early tests, and once again, these are anecdotal. However, to me, this illustrates that we are on the right path to correcting some of the issues that we have in the pharmaceutical company, in the industry. And with that, more people will have access to things that are not as addictive or dangerous to their bodies, because a lot of these drugs are natural. So if we can find out how to use them, then we can end a lot of issues. So that's really good and really positive. And also another thing that I wanted to add that was in the article that I think illustrates, or at least provides examples as to why people are less logical, well-behaved, and rational thinking when they microdose. And so a computational neuroscientist, Joanna Cabral, used an fMRI to check out the brain activity when somebody has been microdosing. So she had 9 participants, and what was shown is that the change in functional connectivity of various brain regions was significant in the portion of the brain where there's well-behaved, rational, and logical thinking. So right there in that section, it showed that they were destabilized. So that goes back to saying, to the beginning of this, where it shows that there's no increase or no change whatsoever in fluid intelligence. And so we actually have evidence from the fMRI that states that in our brain, after microdosing, there's a destabilization there. So there's evidence to support what they have found. However, on the other side of that, they've also found that there's an increased connection because of the destabilization of the well-behaved, rational, and logical part of the brain, which makes sense because there's an improved state of creativity, which goes back to the unconstrained consciousness. So you're able to connect things more freely without thinking of what could be or thinking logically. So although you may not be able to think logically, you'll be able to think more creatively and make connections maybe where you wouldn't have before. So this is the article for the day. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys got something out of it. And most importantly, if you liked it and enjoyed it, please like the page, subscribe, and leave some feedback and leave a review. Tell me what you think. If there's something that you know that has improved throughout time, let me know if you want me to cover it. Thank you guys, and have an awesome Friday. Goodbye.